The billionaire froze when his headlights hit the mansion steps. His daughter was there, barefoot, motionless, wrapped in a torn blanket, and holding her was a black homeless boy, shaking uncontrollably in the freezing dark. "Is she alive?" he whispered. Snow had fallen all night. No alarms, no staff, no help, just a child society ignores, using his own body to keep another child alive. By morning, one would be called a victim. The other would be treated like a suspect. So what really happened during those long, frozen hours? And why did this moment expose a truth America still refuses to face? Comment and tell us where you're watching from. We love seeing how far these stories reach. And subscribe for more powerful stories that demand to be heard. Marcus had learned to measure time by the cold. By 12 years old, winter wasn't a season to him. It was a threat. Each night on the streets felt like a test of survival, especially in wealthy neighborhoods where warm houses glowed behind tall gates, but help never came. People saw him, then looked away. A black boy in worn clothes was easier to ignore than to understand. Marcus Williams hadn't always been homeless. He once had a small apartment, a mother who laughed easily, and rules that made sense. When she died, the system stepped in and failed him. Foster homes came and went, each one colder than the last. By the time he ran, he had already learned a painful lesson. Kindness was something you held on to alone. That night, December air cut through his thin jacket as he sat outside a massive estate. The temperature was dropping fast. Snow was coming. He knew he should walk toward the shelter miles away, but his body begged for rest. Just a minute, he told himself, just long enough to breathe. That's when he heard it, crying, not distant, not imagined, real and terrified. Beyond the iron gate sat Lily, small and shivering, locked out of her own home. Pink pajamas, bare feet on stone. Marcus froze. This wasn't his world. Nothing about this place was meant for kids like him. He could leave. No one would blame him. Society never expected him to stay. Inside the mansion, Richard Hartwell was nowhere near his daughter. Business trips had become routine since his wife died. He believed security systems and staff could replace presence. That belief would cost him everything. Marcus looked at the girl, then at the dark sky. Snowflakes brushed his face. He thought of his mother's voice, quiet, steady. Being poor doesn't mean being unkind. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. Lily looked up, eyes wide with fear. "I'm cold." In that moment, Marcus made a choice that no one would ever expect him to make. A choice that would put his life at risk and expose how differently America treats the same act, depending on who performs it. By morning, help would arrive, but before that, the cold would decide who survived. The cold grew sharper by the minute, cutting through the silence like a warning Marcus couldn't ignore. Snow began to fall in thin, steady sheets, settling on the marble steps, the iron gate, and the thin blanket barely covering two small bodies. Marcus pulled Lily closer, adjusting the torn fabric so it covered her shoulders more than his own. He knew what this kind of cold could do. He had seen it before on people who never woke up. Lily's breathing was fast and uneven. Her lips had started to turn pale. Marcus felt panic rise, but he pushed it down. Panic wouldn't keep her alive. Staying calm might. He tried the front door again, pounding harder this time, then ringing the bell over and over until his knuckles burned. Inside, lights glowed warmly, untouched by the chaos outside. Somewhere inside that mansion, comfort existed. Out here, survival was a gamble. The night security guard, new and unfamiliar with the property, never checked the front cameras. Procedures failed quietly, the way systems often do, especially when the person in danger isn't the one society usually protects. Marcus sat back down beside Lily, pressing his back against the stone to block the wind. He slipped off his jacket and wrapped it around her, knowing exactly what that meant. His body shuddered almost immediately. The cold bit into his arms, his chest, his legs. He clenched his jaw and focused on Lily. "Stay awake," he told her gently. "We have to stay awake." She nodded, eyes glossy with fear. "My dad will be mad," Marcus swallowed. "He'll just be glad you're okay." As the hours passed, Marcus felt his strength draining. His fingers went numb first, then his toes. His thoughts started to blur at the edges. He talked constantly about nothing and everything, just to keep Lily's eyes open. He asked her questions, told her stories, sang quietly when words felt too heavy to form. What Marcus didn't know was that while he fought the cold, the world beyond the gate would soon judge him before understanding him. When headlights finally cut through the snow near dawn, the night shattered. A black car slammed to a stop. Richard Hartwell stepped out, his face frozen in horror as he saw his daughter wrapped in rags, held by a black boy who looked barely alive. For a split second, fear turned into suspicion. Why was a stranger touching his child? Why was a homeless boy here at all? Those thoughts came fast, automatic, shaped by years of quiet bias and distance from realities like Marcus's. Richard ran forward, scooping Lily into his arms. Marcus tried to explain, his voice slurred, his words slow. She was cold, he said. I stayed. Police arrived quickly. Red and blue lights reflected off snow-covered stone. Detective Patricia Moore stepped onto the scene, taking in every detail. The blanket, the jacket, the boy shaking uncontrollably. She had seen this before. A black child in the wrong place was always assumed to be a problem before a protector. Marcus was taken to the hospital under watch. Wrapped in blankets, barely conscious, he heard fragments of conversation. Words like investigation, questions, custody. He felt fear creep in deeper than the cold ever had. When he woke hours later, his body ached, but his first thought wasn't himself. It was Lily. She's okay, a nurse told him softly. Because of you. Relief washed over him until the door opened again. Richard stood there, flanked by officers. His expression was conflicted, gratitude battling something heavier. Marcus recognized that look. He had seen it in store owners, teachers, strangers on the street. The look that asked not what did you do, but what were you planning to do. Detective Moore broke the silence, explaining what the security footage showed. Every moment, every sacrifice. Slowly, Richard's posture changed. His shoulders dropped. His eyes filled. I was wrong, Richard admitted quietly, but the story wasn't over. Because saving Lily didn't erase Marcus's past, it exposed it. Questions about where he came from, why he was alone, and who had failed him began to surface. Social services were notified, files were pulled, old names resurfaced, and somewhere the Henderson family was about to re-enter Marcus's life, bringing with them a fight he never expected to face. As the snow melted outside the hospital window, Marcus realized the hardest part wasn't surviving the night. It was surviving what came next. The hospital room felt smaller as the truth began to surface. Marcus sat upright in the bed, his body still weak, his hands clenched tightly in the blanket. The warmth around him couldn't erase the fear building in his chest. He had survived the cold, but now he was facing something just as dangerous, being judged before being understood. Detective Moore stood near the door, her voice calm but firm as she explained what would happen next. Because Marcus was a minor, because he had no registered guardian, because the system demanded answers before compassion. Each word landed heavier than the last. Richard listened in silence. He had watched the footage. He had seen Marcus give up the only warmth he had. Yet even now, the rules treated that sacrifice like a complication instead of a miracle. When the name Henderson was mentioned, Marcus's heart dropped. The foster family he ran from, the house where kindness was punished, the place that taught him silence was safer than truth. They still have legal custody, the social services caseworker said carefully. Until a court decides otherwise. Marcus shook his head, panic rising. I can't go back there. The room fell quiet. Richard stepped forward, his voice steady but filled with emotion. He won't. That was the moment everything changed. Richard spoke not as a billionaire, not as a man used to winning, but as a father who had almost lost his child. He described what he saw on the footage. The hours Marcus stayed awake, the way he shielded Lily from the wind, the way he chose her life over his own. And the first thing I did, Richard admitted, was assume the worst, because he's black, because he's homeless, and that shame will stay with me forever. Marcus looked down. He had heard confessions like that before. They rarely led to action, but this one did. Richard requested emergency custody. He offered his home, his resources, his name, not as charity, but as responsibility. Still, the system resisted. The Henderson family arrived days later in court, dressed neatly, speaking smoothly. They painted Marcus as difficult, ungrateful, a runaway. Every word felt like a calculated lie wrapped in authority. Marcus felt small again, like he always did in rooms where adults decided his future. Judge Anderson listened quietly. Then Marcus was asked to speak. The courtroom faded as he stood. His voice trembled at first, but then steadied. He spoke about hunger, about bruises hidden under long sleeves, about nights when he chose the street over a locked door because at least the street didn't pretend to love him. He spoke about Lily, about the cold, about staying. I didn't think about being brave, Marcus said softly. I just knew she couldn't be alone. The silence that followed was heavy. Judge Anderson looked directly at the Henderson family. Then at Richard, then at Marcus. This court does not reward appearances, she said. It protects children. The ruling came down like a breath Marcus didn't know he was holding. Custody revoked. Protection granted. The Hendersons removed from his life permanently. Richard closed his eyes, overwhelmed. Marcus felt his knees weaken. But just as relief began to settle, Judge Anderson added one final sentence, one that reminded everyone justice wasn't the end of the story. "This decision changes Marcus's future," she said, "but what happens next will determine whether society has truly learned anything at all." And in that moment, Marcus realized something powerful. The night in the cold was over. But the test of the world had only just begun. Marcus didn't walk out of the courthouse the same way he walked in. For the first time in years, he wasn't looking over his shoulder. He wasn't calculating where he would sleep or how to stay invisible. The weight he had carried since childhood didn't disappear, but it finally loosened its grip. Richard kept his promise, not just with lawyers and paperwork, but with presence. The mansion no longer felt like a monument to distance and wealth. It became a place where Marcus was seen, heard, and protected. Lily clung to him from the start, treating him not like a hero, not like a stranger, but like family. For Marcus, that mattered more than any title or reward. The system that once failed him didn't suddenly become perfect. Detective Moore made sure the Henderson family faced investigation, not silence. Files were reopened. Questions were asked. Accountability, even delayed, finally arrived. It didn't erase the damage, but it sent a message that neglect and abuse don't get a free pass just because they hide behind paperwork. Judge Anderson's ruling closed a chapter, but the impact traveled far beyond that courtroom. Marcus became a name people remembered, not as a suspect, not as a problem, but as a child who did what society never expected him to do. He stayed, he cared, he chose humanity. Years later, Marcus would stand in front of classrooms, speaking to kids who looked like he once did, tired, guarded, unseen. He didn't tell them stories to be admired. He told them stories so they'd know they weren't alone. "I didn't save her because I was special," he once said. "I stayed because someone needed me." That night in the cold exposed something uncomfortable. That when a black child shows courage, the world often responds with doubt before gratitude. That heroism is judged differently depending on who carries it. And that racism doesn't always shout. It often whispers through assumptions, systems, and silence. Marcus lost his childhood early, but he didn't lose his kindness, and that choice changed everything. So the question isn't what Marcus did that night. The question is this: if you were there, if you saw someone in need, would you stay? Or would you walk away? If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. And subscribe to Black Community Struggles for more powerful stories about justice, truth, and our community's fight to be seen. And don't forget to hit the like button. Your support helps these stories reach the people who need them most.